Welcome to Retirement Rescue Radio, a show specifically designed to help retirees and pre-retirees maximize their financial efficiency so you can live the retirement lifestyle you've always imagined. Your host is Nate Miller, investment advisor representative and author of the CPR Retirement Rescue Roadmap. Nate discusses thoughts and ideas from some of today's most knowledgeable professionals in the field of finance. He offers strategies along the way to help you make better financial decisions so you can maximize your retirement. This is Retirement Rescue Radio.
Well, hey there, and welcome to another episode of Retirement Rescue Radio. I'm your host, Nate Miller, and this is most likely going to be the last one of the year that we're going to do, last one of 2020. We're going to do kind of a little bit of a potpourri, a catch-all. We're going to talk a little bit about the cost of living adjustment coming for Social Security. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some year-end IRA moves that you can do or should have done, and ones that we're helping a lot of our clients do. And maybe one of the things that needs to happen, or a few things, actually, not one, a few things that can happen for 2023. And so to start off here, we are getting one of the largest inflation increases to our, cost of living increases to our Social Security in a very, very long time, about 4 decades. We're seeing an 8.7% increase for the Social Security checks. That's going to help alleviate some of the pains that have come due to inflation this year. And the adjustment increase will help cover rising cost of food, housing, healthcare cost, even other essentials. So that's good. It'll help approximately 70 million Americans next year. Annual inflation adjustments have been awarded, trivia, since when? When did we start awarding annual inflation adjusted amounts for Social Security? The answer is 1975. So yes, longer than I've been alive, actually. So I was born in 1980. This happened in 1975. So that's great. However, there is controversy over the metrics that are used in order to do that. Seniors advocate that the methods are inadequate in keeping up with the increasing costs for retirees. Those on the other side of the debate argue that beneficiaries can adjust those costs through budgeting. And so one side is saying, hey, it doesn't actually use the right metrics for the right types of costs that are really increasing for retirees. And because a lot of people don't know that the real way that spending, the glide path that spending takes in retirement, it's not necessarily just a straight up inflation rate. There's been a lot of studies, and even when you're studying for the Retirement Income Certified Professional designation, they talk about the spending smile. And the spending smile suggests that retirees will spend the vast majority of their money, or they'll have higher expenses right when they retire, because they're young, they're still healthy. And so that's when they're going to do the majority of their traveling, the majority of those bucket list items that they have been putting off for a really long time. It's going to happen at the beginning of the retirement. Health is still good. And so that's why that happens. Then we're going to go down a little bit. We actually call it like the 3 phases of retirement. We call them the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. And so as we get a little older, we stop doing a lot of those extra expenses like travel, and we haven't really got the end of life health issues that have come up yet. And so we're starting to see a decline actually in what we are spending. And then it's not a symmetrical smile, by the way. It's not just, the Cheshire cat smile. It kind of goes down a little bit. And then at the end of life is when it kind of spikes back up for all those end of life costs or long-term care, anything like that. And so that's how it actually moves. So that's why there's all the arguments about how it doesn't really increase in the areas that retirees are needing to increase, whatever. Anyway, bottom line, 8.7% is what we're getting next year, one of the largest ever. And that's not going to be eaten up by increases in Medicare either. So that's another good piece of news, because a lot of times this small increase that Social Security has gotten has also been followed by a small increase in Medicare. So the net effect really didn't have a whole lot of impact on your monthly Social Security check. That is not the case this year. So that is good news. So moving along there, now let's start talking about some of the assets, some of our qualified money, IRAs, right? So we're going to go with about 5 IRA reminders for the end of the year here. And the first one would be obvious, the big like elephant in the room when it comes to IRAs, the RMDs. If you are at least 72 by the year end, you have some type of a traditional IRA, SEP IRA, anything like that, then you will have to take a required minimum distribution before the end of the year. Now, if this is your first year, so if you just turned 72, you are given a little bit of an extra deadline. You can actually do it. You can make your first RMD April 1st of 2023. However, the problem with that is now you still have to take another required minimum distribution for the year of 2023. So now you have to take 2 distributions in the same year, and that might not be what you want to do from a tax standpoint. That might bump you up into a higher tax bracket. Definitely work with your advisor or a tax attorney and find out what that would do to your specific situation. Most of the people that we work with, we're going to recommend that they end up doing that all in, if they've separated out into the 2 years. Now, there could be some instances where it may make sense to do it all in 1 year. So let's say you're 72, you just turned 72 this year, so you would have to take your first RMD, but let's say you're still working and you're planning on retiring either, before December 31st or, January 1 of next year. So you're not really going to have any job income at all next year. Well, that would be a great time to actually take your RMD in by April 1st and still have to take your other RMD by, the end of 2023. So that is a time when you could put 2 RMDs into the same year. But yeah, most of the time that's not how things are working, but that would be one instance where it would be a good idea. If you miss the deadline, another trivia question, what is that penalty if you miss taking your required minimum distribution for the year? It is 50%, not 15, not 15, 50% of whatever the amount that you did not take and should have taken. So if your total required minimum distribution was $20,000 and you did not take it, you owe $10,000 in penalty, and you still owe tax on the full 20 as well. So that's how you can lose a big chunk of your RMD to Uncle Sam if you do not take them. If you're supposed to take 20 and you took 10, but you missed the other 10, well, you'd have to pay 5. So that's 50% of the 10 that you missed, right? And so if somebody has multiple IRAs out there, or they've got IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, or anything like that, it's very important to make sure that you are taking the correct RMD from the correct source. And so we have seen some confusion in what accounts can be aggregated and what accounts cannot in the past. All traditional IRA accounts can be aggregated together. So if you have $100,000 in Fidelity, $100,000 in TD Ameritrade, $100,000 with Schwab, that's $300,000 total of IRA money that you can take. Well, you can take all of that from one IRA. You don't have to take little pieces from each IRA. You can take all of the IRA money from that. But if you also have a 401k out there, you're going to have to take an RMD from that 401k in addition to aggregating the IRAs. So yeah, that 401k separate. Same way with the 403b, that's separate from the IRAs. So keep that in mind. If you think you took all of your RMD from your IRAs and you got some 401ks and 403bs out there that you didn't touch, you may not be done yet for the year. Also, if you've got RMDs from inherited IRAs, you might have to take those. So if you've inherited any kind of an IRA, and let's say you were not a spouse, so you have a separate RMD schedule that you need to follow for that as well. And if they passed away, after 2020, then there's going to be a different RMD schedule because you used to be able to stretch it out throughout the entire life. Now it has to be out within 10 years. Also, qualified charitable distributions. We've talked about this. This is where you have someone take a charitable donation directly from your IRA and send it directly to the charity. It bypasses you. You do not receive the funds. They go straight to the charity. You can do that by the end of the year as well, if you are at least 70 and a half. So you don't have to be 72 to do that. You have to be 70 and a half to be able to do that. That QCD is excluded from income. So you get a deduction for doing that. You don't have to pay tax on that. If you take the withdrawal, actually take the distribution, and then write a check to the charity, and you're not itemizing, well, then you're subject to only that 300 or 600, depending on if you're single or married, filing joint, you're subject to just that $300 limit or the $600 limit of being able to contribute to a charity. But if you're at least 70 and a half, you can do 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, whatever, up to 60% of your adjusted gross income can go over to that qualified charity. So Oh, and make sure that whenever you do that, keep whatever documentation from your custodian that showed that it was a QCD. Don't just rely on the 1099 that you get at the end of the year to show that you did a QCD, because it will not. You need to keep the documentation that showed how much you gave in the QCD and take that to your CPA, because we've had some meetings here recently with some people who were not clients, and they thought they were doing QCDs. And when I looked at their tax return, they were not doing the QCDs. They were not getting the benefit of doing the QCDs. Now, they told me that they were pretty darn sure that they did. So what we're having them do is go back to their CPA and get them to amend the last at least 3 years of tax returns, because based on the numbers that we were coming up with, that was going to be several $1,000s that that person could get by actually getting the QCD deduction rather than just that 300, 600, because they didn't have enough to itemize. And so they weren't itemizing anything. So now they can get the deduction for the qualified charitable distribution, and they could still get the big standard deduction. So that was going to be several $1,000s that they could get back. Merry Christmas to them, right? So there we go. And also see if you're doing any type of substantially equal periodic payments, like 72T payments, to avoid the early distribution penalty. If you retired before 59 and a half and you wanted to start taking money out before 59 and a half without the penalty, then a 72T or the substantially equal periodic payments rule may have been one of the things that you were doing. And you want to make sure that, I mean, it's a strict set of rules. So you want to make sure that you haven't taken out any extra. You've been following that plan. You don't want to do any extras. Also, the last one would be Roth conversions. So you might be able to contribute to a Roth by April 15th and call that a 2022 contribution, even if the contribution happened in 2023. You have up until April 15th of the following year to make a contribution. You do not have that same luxury with a conversion. So if you have IRA money that you want to convert to Roth money, that has to happen in the calendar year. So that has to, if you want it to happen for 2022, that has to happen before December 31st. And here we are, the middle of December at the time I'm recording this. And so a lot of times, if you haven't already started that process, you might want to think about doing that ASAP, because processing times get longer as we get closer to the end of the year. And so sometimes, while you may have started the process before December 31st, it may not be able to happen by December 31st, and therefore that Roth conversion does not get counted for 2022. So don't fall under that trap either. So we always help our clients make those deadlines. We keep track of every RMD that comes through, whether that's through the TD Ameritrade, which is the custodian that we use, whether it's through there or any of the annuities that any of our clients may have as well. They also have to notify what the RMD amounts will be, and we combine those together on a master RMD sheet in order to make sure that everybody has taken their required minimum distributions for the year. We've got several clients that take advantage of the qualified charitable deductions throughout the year as well. And so continue to email in if those are anything that you need to have done. And I think last, let's try to figure out, going forward, what can we kind of expect? And I'm not going to go into a big lengthy thing. I'm just kind of going to touch on inflation right now. Because is inflation really slowing down, or is something else going on, right? So the PPI came in at 7.4% year over year for November, which what is it would, and I'll explain what PPI means here in a little bit. It was higher than the expected 7.2, but still well below 8.1 from October. And the PPI reading is the last and most recent inflation data point for the Fed to consider, whenever they're considering whether or not they're going to do a rate hike. And so why is the PPI important? Because that is the producer price index. So we've got the consumer price index, the CPI, and the producer price index, the PPI, which both are measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics and are a family of indexes that measure the average change over time in prices. PPI measures the change in price for what the producers are paying for goods and services that they're selling to the consumers. And so, to give you an example, although gas prices have declined and brought inflation down slightly, the price of everything else kind of remains elevated. And because the reduction in rates may appear right now to still be transitory. So they thought inflation back then, a while back ago, was transitory. Now they're thinking that the reduction in inflation might be transitory, because if we do not address the supply side of our energy needs by producing more petroleum products here domestically, then we are likely going to be subject to price spikes that will impact our inflation readings, right? I mean, if energy costs are not dependable, producers are going to be hesitant to lower their prices, and we're going to continue to experience elevated levels of inflation, which will fluctuate directly with the price of oil. Otherwise, in other words, the lowering of gas prices right now actually might be transitory as well. And we might just be one major storm or one negative event in the Middle East or one super busy driving season away from gas prices rocketing back up to where they were July 4th or even higher. And if the oil price goes back up, then by extension, inflation will also go back up. And there's also something that could be a self-induced wound that could cause the price of oil to go back up as well. Do you remember when they decided to start raiding the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to help lower the prices of gas? Which, the way I equate that to is when we're not producing more oil and instead we tap our reserves, that would be like, let's pretend we're 30 years old, and instead of continuing to work, we decide to quit our job, no more production, right? And we raid our 401k to pay for our expenses far sooner than what we really should. So we're no longer producing, and instead we're draining all of the reserves. That does long-term cannot work. So what if they decide to replenish that Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Well, obviously that is going to drive the price up, because now that's going to shrink the supply because we haven't produced anything more domestically. And so that'd be kind of like quantitative tightening, except with oil. And so until we address energy independence, inflation will most likely be here to stay in some form or another. And so this is probably, it's going to still go into next year. We're going to have to keep on watching what the Fed is going to do with inflation as well, because unfortunately, strong job reports are actually a negative when it comes to right now what the Fed's trying to do to fight inflation. And so we're still not out of the woods yet, guys, but we're going to hope for some great earnings from a lot of these companies during the holiday season, and maybe at least some light at the end of the tunnel for 2023. So that's it, guys. We had a client event here recently that was a lot of fun, our theater event. We had a matinee at theater in Lawrence here, and then we had a dinner afterwards, and we saw a lot of our clients there. We had a great turnout, so much so that I think the same venue won't be able to hold us next year. So we'll have to look for someplace even bigger, and we've already got ideas in our head of how we can make next year even awesomer for y'all. And so that's it. So Merry Christmas for everybody. Have a happy new year. Have a great holiday season. Stay safe, and let's look forward to 2023 together. Take care.